Quite often, I think the most frightening, most intimidating thing we religious people can imagine is facing the possibility that we might be wrong about something, especially wrong when it comes to something we believe about God. I think what scares us most, if we admit it, is that we might have been reading our scriptures and not really understanding them. It's not as threatening to talk with somebody who doesn't share our faith in God or comes from a different religion altogether, because we sort of start knowing from the beginning, we're not starting from the same point. There are going to be places that we inevitably will disagree. But when you speak to somebody who shares your faith in God, who reads the same Bible as you, and they come to completely different conclusions, we have a way of wanting to dig our heels in, or even just to cover our ears. We discovered that this last Thursday in our continuing Bible study through the book of Acts, where we found once again, here's the Apostle Paul, and his harshest, sharpest confrontations aren't always with the Romans, the empire that can crucify you or torture you or flog you, but it's with religious leaders who seem so furious at Paul that they are prepared to start a riot or lynch him or prepare an ambush to kill him on his way to trial before a Roman governor. And as we saw in Acts chapter 23 and 24, part of that hostility, I think, is that Paul comes on the scene not as somebody who's coming from a completely different religion or culture saying, I believe in a completely different set of gods than you, we should decide whose gods are real, but coming and saying, I believe in the same God you do. I've been reading the same scriptures that you do. And we come to very different conclusions about what God's doing in the world. In particular, we saw in this most recent study session, Paul keeps saying, when he's finally put on trial before the Roman governor Felix, he keeps saying, look, the argument that me and these other religious leaders are having really comes down to, I'm announcing the resurrection from the dead. And some of these people, the people out of the Pharisee tradition within Judaism, believed in the resurrection from the dead. And others, the Sadducees, don't believe in resurrection from the dead. And part of it is, how do they interpret? How do they read their scriptures? One group says, well, our authoritative scriptures doesn't say anything very clearly about resurrection. And because we believe the Bible, we believe this is God's word, it doesn't tell us that there's resurrection. Therefore, there isn't. And if you are criticizing our belief, you're criticizing God. And the other group says, well, we read the scriptures differently, and we think that they say there is resurrection from the dead, and if you disagree with us, you're disagreeing with God. How quickly different groups of people make it impossible for them to consider that they were wrong or to hear a new interpretation or a new possibility, because they're convinced what they already believe is grounded in what they believe has come from God, and therefore, if you suggest that maybe they're wrong about that, it suggests you're saying that God is wrong or that God isn't reliable. And Paul comes on the scene not just saying, I believe that there's resurrection from the dead, but saying that there's evidence of it. Jesus came and was put to death and is back to life again. That's clearly still evidence on the side that there's resurrection. But beyond that, Paul is saying this God who raises the dead is also the God who sent me to bring the news of this resurrected Christ to insiders and outsiders, and to say that you outsider Gentiles, you can belong as well. If you have built your whole religious life on, my God belongs to me and my group, to have somebody else come along and say, I believe in that same God, I'm from your same people, and that God now is letting in outcasts, people who you were told all your life long weren't acceptable, couldn't belong, that might be a bridge too far. Because it sounds like you're attacking the way I understand God, the way I understand the scriptures. One of the things I find myself thinking the more I read these late chapters of Acts is, as much as I might want to imagine myself in the role of Paul, this bold voice declaring the gospel, sometimes we're more like the religious leaders who don't want to consider the possibility we've gotten something wrong, who don't want to hear other voices who say, have you ever considered this? Let me try and tell you how I've got to this different conclusion. Sometimes we're the power brokers like the Romans who have the ability to silence or crush people, and sometimes we're like the religious leaders who were so angry and threatened at the idea that we were wrong about something that we want to get rid of or silence any voices that point out anything different. It's hard It's hard to hear somebody say, but I see things differently, especially if you know they share your same faith in Jesus. And sometimes it is the hardest thing in the world, but the most necessary and life-giving thing in the world to ask the question, how'd you get there? Tell me about how you arrive at that conclusion. I share a similar faith in God, or we might say to other Christians, I also am a disciple of Jesus, and here's how my faith leads me in this direction to this conclusion. Help me understand how you get to your conclusion, because I want to take seriously that all of us are trying our very best to listen for the voice of God and to go where Jesus is leading us. Paul, at his best, is one of those voices who isn't looking to weaponize the Bible or beat other people with it, but to say, let me tell you about the God I've met in Jesus. Let me tell you how I've come to the conclusions I've come to. And that maybe if we can be people who listen to others as well, maybe we have the possibility of being more Christ-like in our witness as well. That's the difficult truth, but maybe the necessary practice we need in our lives that we heard in our most recent session here in Acts. But we hope you'll join us as we continue on Thursdays, getting closer to the conclusion of this book, and maybe learning about how the witness of the early church points us for directions, how we live and share our faith, and how we listen to other people in our day and age too. Join us around the table at 1 o'clock on Thursdays, or catch up with these video sessions. See you along the way.